Chapter 13. Active and Passive Voice. Read the following sentences carefully. Rita cut the cake. Rita, subject. Cut, verb. The cake, object. The children ate it. The children, subject. Ate, verb. It, object. They sang a song. They, subject. Sang, verb. A song. In the above sentences, the subjects, Rita, the children, they, do the actions, and there is an object for each verb. Active voice. Sentences in which the subject performs the action and the object receives it are said to be in the active voice. All the above sentences are in active voice. When the subject of the verb is the doer of the action, then it is said to be in active voice. You must have noticed some important points about sentences in the active voice. Verbs are used in the active form. The action is expressed directly. The emphasis is on the subject of the verb rather than the object. Passive voice. Now, let us consider a sentence when the subject receives is not the doer of the action of the verb. Such a sentence is said to be in the passive voice. When the verb in a sentence shows that the subject is not the doer of the action, the sentence is in the passive voice. Let us rewrite the above examples. The cake was cut by Rita. It was eaten by the children. A song was sung by them. In each sentence, the subject, the cake, it, a song, is not the doer of the action. Hence, the sentences are in passive voice. We generally express actions in the active voice. We prefer to use the passive voice when we do not know who has done the action. Examples: my bag was stolen at the fair. It is not clear who stole the bag. The cyclist was hit by a racing truck. It is not clear which truck hit him. The announcement was heard. It is not clear who made the announcement. The action is more important than who did the action or what caused it. Now, read the following notice. Hillwood Academy notice. 14 November. Recitation contest. All the students are hereby informed that a recitation contest is being organized in school for students of Class 8. You are requested to give your names by 10 a.m. today. The list will be prepared by the Cultural Secretary. It will be displayed on the notice board soon. Manu Sen, General Secretary, Students' Club. In the above notice, the subject of each sentence is not the doer of the action. All the sentences are in the passive voice. Points to remember. Verbs, which require a direct object to complete their meaning, are called transitive verbs. Example: Neeta found her mobile. Intransitive verbs do not require objects to complete their meaning. Examples: Jagan is an engineer. John is sleeping. Important facts. Transformation of sentences from the active to passive form can be easily done if a few points are kept in mind, but we should always remember that sentences with intransitive verbs without an object cannot be transformed into passive voice. Example: Rita threw the ball. Rita threw, verb. The ball, object. This can be changed into passive voice. The ball was thrown by Rita. Only those sentences in the active voice that have transitive verbs and therefore objects can be changed into the passive voice. Future continuous and perfect continuous tenses do not have passive forms. Ditransitive verbs can have two passive forms because they have two objects. This is explained later in the lesson in detail. Points to remember. While changing a sentence from the active to passive voice, many points need to be kept in mind. The object of the verb in the active voice becomes the subject in the passive voice. Example: Rita cut the cake. Active: the cake was cut by Rita. passive. The form of the verbs is changed in accordance with the tense. It becomes be, is, are, was, were, plus the participle of the verb. Example, the children ate it, active. It was eaten by the children, passive. Here, ate is changed to was eaten. The subject of the active voice is expressed as by plus agent in the passive voice. Example, they sang a song, active. A song was sung by them, passive. The subject-verb agreement is important in all sentences. If the number of the passive subject is plural, the verb are, were is used. Example, the cakes were eaten by Niti. If the number and person in a passive sentence is singular and in the third person, the verb is, was is used. Example, the cake was eaten by the children. Here is a table which shows changes in tenses when converting verbs from the active to passive voice. Example, the farmer grows wheat. The verb to grow is given below in the active and passive voice of all forms of tenses. Tense, verb form, active voice, passive voice, simple present, grows, is, are grown, present continuous, is, are growing, is, are being grown, perfect, present perfect, has, have grown, has, have been grown, present perfect continuous, has, have been growing, simple past, grew, was, were grown, past continuous, was, were growing, was, were being grown, past perfect, had grown, had been grown, past perfect continuous, had been growing, simple future, will grow, will be grown, future continuous, will be growing, future perfect, will have grown, will have been grown, future perfect continuous, will have been growing, indicates no passive voice, for these particular tense forms can be used. Note that verbs in the perfect continuous and future continuous tense cannot be changed into passive forms. Change of verb forms in passive voice in different kinds of tenses. Simple present tense, active, call, calls, passive, is, are, am called. The sentence given below is in the simple present tense and is in the active voice. Note the changes when it is rewritten in the passive voice. Example, Ridhima eats biscuits every evening. Active, biscuits are eaten by Ridhima every evening. Passive, simple past tense, active, called. Passive, was, were called. Example, the artist sketched the portrait. Active, the portrait was sketched by the artist. Passive, he packed the vases. Active, the vases were packed by him. Passive, simple future tense, active, will call. Passive, will be called. Example, the old lady will distribute blankets among the needy families. Active, blankets will be distributed by the old lady among the needy families. Passive, present continuous tense, active, is, are, am calling. Passive, is, are, am being called. Example, Saroj is calling Geeta to the garden. Active, Geeta is being called by Saroj to the garden. Passive, past continuous tense, active, was, were calling. Passive, was, were being called. Example, the carpenter was cutting wood. Active, Wood was being cut by the carpenter. Passive. Present perfect tense. Active. Has, have called. Passive. Has, have been called. Example. The auto rickshaw drivers have declared a strike. Active. A strike has been declared by the auto rickshaw drivers. Passive. Past perfect tense. Active. Had called. Passive. Had been called. Example. The officers had informed the minister about the completed project. Active. The minister had been informed by the officers about the completed project. Passive. Future past. Future perfect tense. Active. Will have called. Passive. Will have been called. Example. The contractor will have constructed the dam before the onset of rainy season. Active. The dam will have been constructed by the contractor before the onset of rainy season. Passive. If the subject or object in the sentence in the active voice is a pronoun, it changes its form as shown in the next table. Active voice, subject position. I, we, he, she, they, you, it. Passive voice, object position. Me, us, him, her, them, you, it. Do not change. Examples. She ate the pudding. Active. The pudding was eaten by her. Passive. They played cricket. Active. Cricket was played by them. Passive. In the above examples, she changed to her and they changed to them. Ditransitive verbs with two objects. So far, it has been discussed that a sentence may be changed into the passive voice when the transitive verb has only one object. When a transitive verb has two objects, then there are two possible ways of converting the sentence into the passive voice. In such a sentence, either of the two objects may be used as the subject in the passive voice, while the other remains unchanged and is called the retained object. Example. He gave us some almonds. Active. In this sentence, some almonds is the direct object and us is the indirect object. When it is converted into the passive voice, either of the two objects can be used as a subject. Examples. Some almonds were given to us. Passive. We were given some almonds. Passive. The form used in sentence 1 is usually preferred. Few more examples are: he gave her some roses. Active. Some roses were given to her. Passive. We know the facts. Actives. The facts are known to us. Passive. She made him complete the task. Active. He was made to complete the task. Passive. Note, use of by becomes unnecessary in the passive voice when emphasis is on action rather than the doer, when the doer is unknown, when the doer of the action is obvious, or when the doer of the action is a large group of different individuals. Example. Fruit salad was served to the guests. Passive. Conversion of interrogative sentences into passive voice. Read the following sentences. Did mother bake these biscuits? Active. Were these biscuits baked by mother? Passive. Have you written these letters? Active. Have these letters been written by you? Passive. It is evident that auxiliary verbs do, does, did in an interrogative sentence in the active voice change into is, are, were in the passive structure. Auxiliary verbs like have, has in the active voice in interrogative sentences change to have been plus past participle of the verbs. Modals like can, must, should do not change in active or passive voice. When a question begins with who, what, which, and it is changed from the active to passive voice, the question word does not change in the beginning and a preposition, usually by, is placed towards the end of the question. Example: which road have the protesters blocked? Active. Which road has been blocked by the protesters? Passive. Words like when, where are transformed in a similar way. Conversion of imperative sentences into passive voice. Imperative sentences can be converted into the passive voice by following a few steps. Passive: let it be done, or it should, may, ought to, must be done. The passive structure of a command or order begins with let. The imperative verb changes to be plus participle. Examples: do not ill-treat the poor. Active: let the poor not be ill-treated. Passive: switch off all the fans. Active: let all the fans be switched off. Passive. To change an advice or suggestion into the passive form, we change the object of the imperative sentence into the subject. In the passive structure, the verb expressing the advice or suggestion becomes should, must, plus be, plus past participle of the verb. Examples: take medicine at regular timings. Active: medicines should be taken at regular intervals. Passive: call the police. Active: the police must be called. Passive. In an imperative sentence, when the requests begin with please or kindly, sometimes the phrase you are requested to is placed before the imperative verb. In the negative sentences, you are requested not to plus verb is used. For sentences asking permission, the words kindly, please are placed between may and be. Examples: please send in the invoice at the earliest. Active: the invoice may kindly be sent at the earliest. Passive: please tie your seat belts. Do not get up. Active: you are requested to tie your seat belts and not to get up. He requested me to attend the party. I was requested to attend the party by him. Change in modals. Active: may, might call. Passive: may, might be called. Examples: one can't climb cliffs. Active: cliffs can't be climbed. Passive: we may call the watchman. Active: the watchman might be called. Passive. Passive voice is commonly used in formal writing. It is used while writing scientific reports. Example: the crystals are heated in a test tube. Writing headlines and advertisements. Examples: car prices hiked. 80 awarded for bravery acts. Writing formal notices or making announcements. Examples: students are requested to give their names as volunteers. Children are requested to stand in a queue. Writing newspaper reports. Example: new flyover inaugurated by the mayor.